Hello, everybody. I'm Grant Fluff from Fletcher Sports Zone, and welcome back to our second edition of Hall of Fame or Hall of Good. I did the quarterback edition a couple of weeks ago, and tonight we are going to move on to the running back position. So let's get underway. Again, these are just strictly my opinions. We're going to be ending Hall of Fame debates. This is just my opinion, though. Feel free to leave your opinions in the comments below if you would like. But again, this is just strictly my opinions. Don't want anyone to hate me over opinions, but this is just what I think. Now, again, most of these players I have also not watched because, just like last time, I'm choosing retired players only. But that being said, I know enough about the player. I know enough about the player's statistics. And even though I started watching football in 2013 and I never seen any of these running backs from the 90s or early 2000s, I've only seen highlights of them and whatnot. The point is, I feel I know enough information to still make a judgment call. All right. So, welcome to Hall of Famer, Hall of Good Running Back Edition. These are, of course, borderline Hall of Famers. Should they be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Well, we'll settle that debate right now. And we will begin first with, I think it's actually Ricky Watters first. It is. So Ricky Watters was a 5-time Pro Bowler. He began his career with the 49ers, and he made a Pro Bowl in his first 5 years in the league. In 1996 was probably his best year with the Philadelphia Eagles. Carried the ball 353 times, led the league in that category. 1,411 yards, 13 touchdowns. That was one of 3 times in his career he hit double-digit touchdowns in the rushing end. Over 10,000 yards, a Super Bowl 29 champion with the 49ers, and he spent the last 4 years of his career on the Seahawks, which people kind of forget Ricky Watters was on the Seahawks for a little bit, but he had over 4,000 rushing yards, just under 1,000 career carries with the Seahawks. Now, personally, even though, yes, his career statistics are the best in Seattle, I do associate him more as a 49er and as an Eagle, probably the most as an Eagle. But to sell the debate, is Ricky Watters in the Hall of Fame? Yeah, he probably should be. I'm going to say yes on that one. I think Ricky Watters should be in. Again, 5-time Pro Bowler. He never led the league in rushing, and that's probably his biggest gripe. But again, over 10,000 rushing yards, 78 touchdowns, 5 Pro Bowls, no All-Pros, which again probably hurts his resume a little bit. But he also won a Super Bowl. I think he at least did enough to make a Hall of Fame resume. He is unfortunately probably going to have to continue to wait for a little bit. The last running back I know, at least off the top of my head, that made the Hall of Fame was Edgerrin James, and I'm pretty sure that was in 2020, unless I'm completely blanking on someone. I think it's going to be a while for a lot of these running backs to eventually be in the Hall of Fame anyways. But for now, we'll roll with Ricky Watters, and I don't know when he'll get in, but I do think he will eventually within the next, hopefully, 10 to 20 years. All right, moving on to Corey Dillon. He set the NFL rushing record, at least at the time. He had 278 rushing yards against the Denver Broncos in the 2000 season. He made 4 Pro Bowls, 1 Super Bowl 39 with the Patriots, over 11,200 career rushing yards, and 82 touchdowns. And he played on some god-awful Bengals teams, and he really salvaged the season half the time. He ran for 1,000 career yards in 7 of his first 8 seasons. Great season in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2004, where he made the Pro Bowl. His best season was in 2004 with the Patriots, In 15 games, he ran for 1,635 yards and 12 touchdowns. He scored 12 touchdowns the following year in 2005 with New England. And then ending in 2006 before he retired, he scored 13 rushing touchdowns, a career high. Even in his rookie season in Cincinnati, although he obviously didn't win Rookie of the Year, he had a very good season. Was probably the best rookie running back with 1,129 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. People probably associate him more with the Bengals. I'm from Massachusetts, so I kind of associate him more with the Patriots. I think that Super Bowl 39 Patriots team was one of the best teams in the early 2000s to win a Super Bowl. So, yeah, whether you associate him with a Bengal or a Patriot, you have to recognize his greatness. He is, I'm pretty sure, either the second or third running back that has the most amount of rushing yards that's not currently in the Hall of Fame. I know Fred Taylor's at top of the list. We'll get to him in a minute. Well, actually, in multiple minutes. But Corey Dillon, I would probably say is a Hall of Famer. I mean, especially if I'm going to put Ricky Williams in the Hall of Fame. Dillon has one less Pro Bowl, but more touchdowns, more rushing yards, and he owns, I think, now that 278 rushing yard game. I'm pretty sure that's second or third all time. I know Adrian Peterson passed it when he ran for 296 yards against the Chargers in 2007. But, so I know Dillon doesn't own the record anymore, but it was a then record, and it stood for, well, at least 7 years. Moving on to Maurice Jones-Drew. Oh, my goodness. I am a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. I love Maurice Jones-Drew. Yes, Blake Bortles. He is my favorite NFL player. I know I mention it often. He was one reason why I got into watching football and became a Jaguars fan. But Maurice Jones-Drew is the other reason. And I really wish Jones-Drew never went to the Raiders and he stuck with Bortles during his rookie year. That would have been pretty cool. But yeah, Maurice Jones-Drew retired in 2018, and I don't think he is yet to make the Hall of Fame ballot, which definitely kind of ticks me off, as I mentioned, as a very passionate Jaguar fan. 3 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro, 8,000 rushing yards, 68 touchdowns. He was also a great receiving back. That 2011 season he had led the league in rushing yards with 1,606 rushing yards. You want to know how much he was averaging a game? 100! He was averaging 100.4 yards a game in 2011. By far his best. His second best was in 2010, averaging 94.6 a game, where he ran for 1,324 yards in 2010. The previous year, he didn't make the Pro Bowl from 2009 to 2011. The thing is, he ran for a lot of yards, but he never scored a lot of touchdowns. 68 on the surface is great. He scored double-digit touchdowns in 3 of his first 4 seasons, but that was when him and Fred Taylor were primarily splitting the carries. Once he became the starter in 2009, he did make his first Pro Bowl on his own, 1,391 rushing touchdowns and 15 touchdowns. 1,391 yards, 15 touchdowns. Yeah, 1,324 touchdowns. We wouldn't be making this video, would we? But no, he was great even up to 2013. He still managed to get over 800 yards. We don't mention his stint with the Raiders. That'll only hurt his Hall of Fame resume. But from 2006 to 2013, he was a dominant running back. He was also a great special teamer. Like, you want to talk about a very underrated kick returner? That was Maurice Jones-Drew. All right. Is the second round pick from the 2006 draft out of UCLA, is he a Hall of Famer? Man, oh man, does it. My heart says yes, but my mind says no. And in a video like this, I got to stick with what my mind says. He just missed out. Like I mentioned, if he continued to have more double-digit touchdown seasons after 2000, I think it was 9. Yeah, after 2009, probably if he had closer to 80, 85 touchdowns, I would say no doubt. He did not break the 9,000-yard rushing barrier, which kind of stinks, and for the most part, he was a relatively healthy player. Again, 2011 is probably the greatest Jaguar season ever by a running back, and that's saying something because, again, I mentioned Fred Taylor later on, but he had some fantastic seasons with the Jaguars. So I do think Jones-Drew holds record for the greatest rushing season in Jaguar history, but yeah, he had a lot of really solid seasons, but I think he can get in the Hall of Fame. But if I had to make my judgment call, basically, would he make the Hall of Fame within the next 25 to 30 years? No. 50? Maybe. 25? Probably not. And that's kind of when I make these videos, I kind of judge, like, do I see them in the Hall of Fame like 20, 25 years from now, like the absolute latest? Unfortunately, I don't know. And again, you can go into the whole argument that, oh, Jacksonville isn't a big market. I mean, come on, it literally took until this year for Tony Baselli to get in the Hall of Fame, right? Oh my God. I mean, Fred Taylor's not in yet. Jimmy Smith's not in yet. You know, there's a lot of Jaguars that are really good, but probably will never make the Hall of Fame. And again, if Jones-Drew played with the team like the Steelers, if he played with the team like the Kansas City Chiefs, the New England Patriots, the San Francisco 49ers, I think he would have a way better shot at making the Hall of Fame than he does now with his just same old statistics. But again, I think him playing with Jacksonville, unfortunately, plays a huge issue and why I don't see him making it anytime soon. That sucks, man, because again, right next to Bortles, it's Maurice Jones-Drew as one of my all-time favorite Jaguar players. Moving on to Shaun Alexander. Now, I'm not necessarily using this as the only reason why I would put Shaun Alexander into the Hall of Fame. He has more career touchdowns than Barry Sanders. Let that sink in. Shaun Alexander, I think it was 113 career touchdowns, is better than Barry Sanders' 109. Now, granted, I know Barry Sanders retired after, 7-8 seasons, and he still managed to rack up 15,000 yards. I'm not saying Shaun Alexander is better than Barry Sanders. Oh, absolutely not. But the moral of the story is stats don't lie. Alexander has more career touchdowns than Barry Sanders. He also has 3 Pro Bowls and a 2005 MVP, where he led the league with the then NFL record 27 rushing touchdowns. He also had 1,880 rushing yards in 2005, making his only All-Pro, making his only Super Bowl. He also led the league in 2001, a season where, God, I have no idea how he didn't make the Pro Bowl in 2001. He led the league with 14 touchdowns and had 1,318 yards. Also in 2004, which was the second best in his career, probably season-wise, 16 rushing touchdowns, almost 1,700 yards. Incredible. Incredible. Shaun Alexander only played for 8 seasons. And I get that's a little too short. Probably if he played 11, 12, got over that 10, 11,000 yard barrier, he probably is in the Hall of Fame today. But I'm going to still put Alexander in the Hall because he made the Pro Bowls. He's won the MVP. And again, the sole fact that he has more career touchdowns than Barry Sanders is jaw-dropping. It really is. And I think you have to take a look at a player. Like, his nickname is literally Mr. Touchdown. Like, he got the necessary touchdowns he needed. He was clutch. He was a powerful runner in the early 2000s when there was a fantastic amount of running backs in the league. Alexander was always one of the top rushers in the NFC. Give me Alexander in the Hall of Fame all day. Probably should have been in by now. He's not. That's fine, but I want him in someday. Roger Craig is next. This is another nice debate. 4 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro, won 3 Super Bowls with San Francisco. Just shy of 2,000 career rushing attempts. Had over 8,000 yards, 56 rushing touchdowns. I also know he had quite a bit of receiving touchdowns along with a lot of touchdowns in the postseason. Let me just pull it up here. In the playoffs, he had 7 career touchdowns and over 800 rushing yards. And again, that's in 3 Super Bowl winning efforts with San Francisco. This is kind of my thing. I don't necessarily think when a player is in the Hall of Fame, you judge it off of rings. But I think in a case like Roger Craig, where he's kind of just like Maurice Jones-Drew, statistically wise, but because he was on the most dominant team in the 1980s, the San Francisco 49ers, was the running back to the Bill Walsh San Francisco 49ers with Joe Montana. He was the main quarterback. Jerry Rice the main receiver. Roger Craig the main running back. And I'm kind of stunned Craig isn't in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he retired in 93, which means he would have been eligible in 98, 99, around there. You're telling me you couldn't have thrown him in the Hall of Fame in some random 2000s year? That's what kind of surprises me. And that's why I feel like Craig's time's quickly running short on the Hall of Fame. But again, this is based off of my opinion. And again, because he has those rings and was a key championship contributor along with the great regular season statistics, I gotta put Craig in the Hall of Fame. And yeah, definitely would have probably had him in by now. I mean, especially if, no offense to Jerome Bettis, that's kind of my guy. That's kind of the Hall of Fame running back I look at and I say, is this guy better than Jerome Bettis? That's basically the Hall of Fame running back I kind of compare with. And Roger Craig, again, maybe he didn't have better regular season statistics, but again, the fact that he was a playoff performer, give me Craig in the Hall of Fame. Next up, we have Priest Holmes. A lot of these guys are from the early 2000s now that I'm thinking about it. Priest Holmes had a 10-year career, 86 rushing touchdowns, 3 Pro Bowls with 3 All-Pros, 8,000 career rushing yards, and won a Super Bowl with the Ravens in 2000. He also missed the entire 2006 season with an injured spine. So you're probably looking at over 90 career touchdowns and roughly 700 yards instead of 8,172. But the Hall of Fame made a what-if game because Bo Jackson would have made the video and he would have been in the Hall of Fame if the Hall of Fame was a what-if game. Hall of Fame voting is strictly the stats I see in front of me. Well, let's see. He won the 2002 Offensive Rookie of the Year, scoring 21 touchdowns. Incredible. 1,615 yards. Wow. 2001, the year prior, his first ever All-Pro appearance. Led the league in rushing yards with 1,555. 8 touchdowns. Okay. 2003, not as good as 2001 or 2002, but still very good. Actually, led the league in touchdowns until Shaun Alexander tied the record, 27 rushing touchdowns with 1,420 rushing yards, and that was in 2003. Wow. Great 3 to 4 year dominance in 2004. I don't know how he didn't make the Pro Bowl, but he still racked up 900 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on almost 200 carries. Well, almost 900 rushing yards on almost 200 carries. If he reached 200 carries, he probably would have just clipped the 900-yard mark. Well, he had those 4 years of dominance. And I know the Hall of Fame is against just judging a player based off a random sense of dominance. But here's the thing. Priest Holmes was an absolute monster. He was a solid role player on the Ravens, but he didn't get his true chance until he joined the Chiefs in 2001. I mean, he was a 1,000-yard rusher in 98. He rushed for 1,008 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's not terrible. In the Ravens Super Bowl year in 2000, he was a backup. 588 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that was with some terrible quarterbacks. He's done well with the kind of mediocre Ravens. And, Ravens weren't mediocre with Holmes. The Chiefs kind of were. The Chiefs were a weird team. They were a team that just couldn't break the hump. They just could not make the play. Well, they made the playoffs. They just couldn't win in the playoffs. They would either lose to like the Colts. Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure every single time the Chiefs made the playoffs in the 2000s, they were losing to the Colts. Sucks. But anyway, Holmes, yeah, I don't think he really performed well in the playoffs. Yeah, I only made the playoffs twice, 221 rushing yards. Yeah, so playoff statistics don't really play a huge factor in that. I mean, even in the Ravens Super Bowl run, he only had 18 rushes for 45 yards. So, yeah, the playoffs don't really make a huge effect on Holmes here. This is essentially based off of regular season statistics. I would say, yeah, how is this? Yes, Priest Holmes should be in the Hall of Fame statistically. With that being said, he's got to wait a little longer, I feel. Especially if guys like Ricky Watters or Roger Craig haven't gotten in the Hall of Fame yet, and they played back in the 80s and 90s. I feel like, they should get in before Priest Holmes. Yeah, Holmes has better necessarily statistics, but I feel pretty much until Patrick Mahomes came around, the Chiefs weren't really a force to be reckoned with, especially in the Hall of Fame. Like, they have Will Shields and a couple of other great players. Don't get me wrong, Derek Thomas, but Chiefs were kind of mediocre. And again, they didn't do anything in the playoffs when Priest Holmes was there, despite Holmes playing amazing. So I would say, yes, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but he definitely got to wait a little longer. But yes, I think I would put him in just because of the regular season statistics. Next up, this is going to be a fun one. Mike Alstad, the choo-choo A-Train, baby. 6 Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pros. Listen, and obviously won the Super Bowl with the Bucs in 2002. You're saying 6 Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pros. That should be Hall of Fame worthy, which again, it's a good debate. Here's why. Even though he only has 5,000 rushing yards and 58 touchdowns, you want to know why I say Mike Alstad is a Hall of Famer? It's because, you guessed it, he was a fullback. If he was just a regular power back, again, he would be up for debate, but I don't know if I would personally put him in. The fact that Alstad, I guess maybe other than Kyle Juszczyk, and Juszczyk is nowhere near what Mike Alstad was, considered the last great fullback of the NFL, I think you got to put the A-Train in there, man. And again, he was no slouch. 6 Pro Bowls, over 5,000 rushing yards. Only had double-digit touchdowns once. Never broke 1,000 yards once. There are certainly reasons why Alstad's been waiting, and he's going to, again, kind of just like Holmes, he's going to continue to wait for a long time. But, yeah, I think at the end of the day, Alstad will make the Hall of Fame. Probably won't be for another 10 to 15 years at minimum, but, yeah, I do think Alstad will be in someday. All right, moving on to the only player from the 1970s on this list, Chuck Foreman. Played from 1973 and 1980 with the Vikings and Patriots. 5 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro, 5,950 rushing yards and 53 touchdowns. He was the NFC Player of the Year in 1976, where he made the Pro Bowl rushing for 1,155 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. He had 13 career touchdowns twice in his career, which was his career high, back-to-back years in 75 and 76. He made the Pro Bowl his first 5 years in the league with an All-Pro in 75. Well, is he a Hall of Famer? Again, I could kind of go down the Alstad route where in Alstad's case, why I would put him in is because he's a fullback. The reason why I think you could put Foreman in is because, obviously, 5-time Pro Bowler, 5,000 yards rushing, but also because he played in the 70s when it was a run-heavy league. The Vikings had playoff success. Let's just take a look at Foreman's playoff statistics here. Yeah, very solid. He appeared in a couple of Super Bowls. 860 rushing yards with 7 touchdowns rushing in the postseason. That's certainly not terrible. That's only going to help out his case here. But with that being said, this seems like a player that, no offense to Foreman, again, great player. He could certainly be in the Hall of Fame. I obviously be happy if he made it, but I would have to say no. And it's not necessarily it's a no, he's not a Hall of Fame player. It's if he was in the Hall of Fame, he would have been inducted already. It's kind of that type of thing where if he retired in 1980, he would have been eligible in 85, 86. He would have probably gotten in the Hall of Fame sometime in the 90s. Kind of once you went into the early 2000s, of course, I mean, look at all these early 2000s running backs we have on this list, right? All those guys are definitely more deserving than Foreman. In fact, I think when making this list, Foreman is unfortunately the one who's probably least deserving out of the list. And again, that's obviously not saying he's not deserved. It's just 5,000 rushing yards is kind of low. 53 touchdowns is kind of low. Again, you played with Fran Tarkenton and a great defense. You were great in the 70s. But again, if you didn't get in the Hall of Fame by the late 90s, kind of want to accept that it may not happen. I hope I'm wrong, man. Because, again, Chuck Foreman is very underrated. Hence why I put him on the list. But I can't put him in the Hall. Moving on to Clinton Portis. 2002 Rookie of the Year with the Broncos. Made the Pro Bowl in 2003 with Denver. 1,591 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. But you probably remember his time primarily with the Redskins, where he ran for over 6,800 yards and 46 touchdowns. Yeah, and he had 2 Pro Bowl appearances in 2003, like I mentioned, with the Broncos, and 2008 with Washington, where he had 1,487 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns on 342 carries. So here's the deal. Yardage-wise, he's in the Hall of Fame. Touchdown-wise, you can make an argument he can be in the Hall of Fame. 2 Pro Bowls. That's my only nod on Portis. Now, I know it's not necessarily his fault, but 2 Pro Bowls is a bit low. That's a bit low. Again, I know he was playing in an era with, he was in the NFC primarily. So he was playing with who? Shaun Alexander, Tiki Barber. Tiki Barber is actually the guy after Portis. A little update for you there. Mickey Williams was retired at this point. I'm trying to see if there was any other fantastic NFC running backs. I mean, they had Reggie Bush and Deuce McAllister and stuff with the Saints. D'Angelo Williams. It's more Portis, but probably if he stayed on Denver, he would have had 4 or 5 Pro Bowls, and I would be more willing to put him in the Hall of Fame. Again, I do think statistically he is a Hall of Famer. I'm just saying my only knock on him is the 2 Pro Bowls. But yeah, I'd say Portis in the Hall of Fame. Again, kind of just like a lot of these guys, he's still going to have to wait for a while. But yes, I do think he should eventually get in. But again, he's had to wait for a while now, and I do think he will have to continue to wait. Tiki Barber up next, like I mentioned. Terrible human off the field, but on the field, he was an absolute monster. 10,449 rushing yards and 55 touchdowns, all with the Giants. He didn't really get that starting role with the G-Men until 2000, 3 years into his career. He broke 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, and then 2002, he continued to have a great season. Somehow didn't make the Pro Bowl, but had 1,387 yards and 11 touchdowns. 2003, ran for 1,200 again, just missed out on the Pro Bowl. And then last 3 years of his career, 04 to 06, he made the Pro Bowl. 2004, 13 touchdowns, 1,518 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. 2005 is only all-pro season, 1,860 rushing yards along with 9 touchdowns. And 2006, 1,662 yards with 5 touchdowns. Now, obviously, we know the whole story of Tiki Barber off the field. He cheated on his wife and married a woman that was way younger than his age. But, O.J. Simpson is still a Hall of Fame running back. Right? Antonio Brown is still a Hall of Fame receiver. Yeah, off the field issues can affect a player's Hall of Fame legacy, but at some point, if he didn't break the rules of the game, I think you got to let him in eventually, and I think Barber will be in. Again, I think the over 10,000 rushing yards definitely does it. 55 touchdowns is a bit on the low end, and he could have obviously done better than one All-Pro, but considering the statistics, I'll give it to him. So Tiki is in the Hall of Fame. I know his real name's like Atalim Kimbu Akim Barber or something like that. Again, better off calling him Tiki. All right, next up we got CJ2K, Chris Johnson. No, don't worry. I'm not going to be a Giants Jaguar fan and be like, Chris Johnson's overrated. Don't worry. I'm not going to do that. 2009 made his only All-Pro. 2006 rushing yards with 14 touchdowns. That was his career high. He had 91 and 94 career touchdowns. He broke the 1,000-yard barrier each year from 2008 to 2013. And unfortunately, just kind of fizzled out on the Jets and Cardinals near the end of his career. If he stayed in Tennessee and just stayed a 1,000-yard rusher, he would have had about 14,000 rushing yards. 1,000 rushing yards, of course. And yeah, he'd be a Hall of Famer, no doubt. 9,651 yards, and just like Tiki Barber, 55 touchdowns, 3 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro. I mean, I feel if I put someone like Tiki Barber or Priest Holmes in the Hall of Fame, shouldn't I put Chris Johnson in? Probably should. He probably is a Hall of Famer. I don't want to be too picky. He's going to have to wait. He's had to wait a couple of years. He's going to have to wait a very long time. But yeah, I think he will get in. This is tough because if Chris Johnson never had his 2,000-yard season, I would have actually said no. But because he had 2,000-yard rusher and because he ran for over 1,000 yards for the first 6 years of his career, in due time, just give it to him, right? Next up, we have Jamal Lewis. Man, to think the Ravens had Jamal Lewis and Priest Holmes in the same backfield. Holy crap. So, okay. Just kind of like what I was saying with CJ2K here. 10,607 rushing yards, 58 touchdowns. 1 Pro Bowl, which was an All-Pro season. I know he ran for 2,000 rushing yards. And again, kind of just like Clinton Portis, it's not really Jamal Lewis's fault he didn't make more Pro Bowls. He was just a very consistent player with the Ravens and Browns. But, and again, listen, I know he had 2,000-yard season, like I'm saying, but really, can I put a guy who had 1 Pro Bowl and 1 All-Pro in the Hall of Fame over someone who has 2 or 3 All-Pros and is currently not in the Hall of Fame? You know what? I think I've been a little bit too kind to a few of these players in this video. Not that has anything to do with anything, but Jamal Lewis, great career, man. Oh, I gotta put my foot down and say no. Again, it's the 1 Pro Bowl that sucks. Rushing yard wise, yes. He definitely has it at over 10,000. But again, it's the 1 Pro Bowl and the 58 regular season touchdowns. That does not help his cause. If Jamal Lewis was to make the Hall of Fame, I'd be happy for him. Because, again, rushing yards wise, with over 10,600, he deserves it, that on its own. But, I mean, I probably put him ahead of like Chuck Foreman and maybe MJD, but I would say that's about it. Here we go. Fred Taylor. This is the player, I guess, disregarding Frank Gore. He is the player. Now, this is not going to make a lot of sense. What I was just saying about, oh my goodness. What I was just talking about freaking, of Jamal Lewis. I don't know why I was making on Lewis's name. This is going to be a little bit different. All right, because Fred Taylor made a Pro Bowl and he never made an All-Pro. But, and I know, Grant, you're a Jaguar fan. Hear me out. Aside Frank Gore, currently, how's this? Based off of currently eligible running backs that belong in the Hall of Fame, currently eligible running backs, Fred Taylor has the most amount of rushing yards that isn't in the Hall of Fame right now. 11,695, and that's not including playoffs. That is not including playoffs. I think he's actually well over 12,000 if you include the playoffs. Yep, over 600. Yep. Over 12,000 rushing yards, including the playoffs. Cornerstone for the early Jaguars franchise. 1998. 1,200 yards as a rookie. 1,223 yards, 14 touchdowns. In 2000, 1,999. So close to 1.4K in 2000 with 12 touchdowns. Injured in 2001. 2002, he comes back from that injury. 1,314 yards. 2003, how do you not make the Pro Bowl? 1,572 yards rushing and you don't make the Pro Bowl? 2007 was his only year he made the Pro Bowl. 1,202 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Before he left the Jaguars in 08, played with the Patriots in 2009, 2010, didn't do much but be a backup running back there. In the playoffs, still holds the record for the longest rushing touchdown playoff history at 90 yards. 1999 divisional round against the Dolphins. And like I mentioned, over 600 rushing yards, putting him over 12,000 total in his career. Yes, the one Pro Bowl is a nod, and that's probably why Taylor hasn't been inducted in the Hall of Fame yet. But my God, put him in. It's going to be just like the Tony Baselli situation. Jaguar fans, we're going to be crying for so long, and after so long, the NFL is just going to say whatever and put him in. That's right. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is having conspiracy theories against the Jaguars that you have never heard of. They're a small market franchise, therefore we have to punish their fan base and former players. Obviously kidding, but yeah, over 12,000 yards, 70 career touchdowns. The one Pro Bowl, that don't mean nothing when you ran for over 1,500 and didn't make it. Dare I say 2007 was one of the years where he shouldn't have made the Pro Bowl, but he ended up doing so anyway. That's neither here nor there. Fred Taylor, Hall of Famer, debate a wall. No, but like literally, I want non-Jaguar fan takes on Fred Taylor being in the Hall of Fame. I feel like most people say he's still in. Because again, over 12,000 rushing yards. And he made a Pro Bowl, therefore he's eligible. What can I say? And last, but yeah, this has to be last, right? Yes, Frank Gore. Just like how I ended off the quarterback edition with Phillip Rivers, I'm going to end this one with Frank Gore. And just like the Phillip Rivers argument, If you don't think Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer, debate a wall. There's nothing more I can say but to debate a wall. This guy is third all-time in NFL rushing with 6,000 yards flat. This man averaged 1,000 yards a dot on the season. He made the 2010s Hall of Fame team. He won the 2006, wasn't Rookie of the Year, but he won the Pro Football, I don't know what it was, but it's the PFWA award. Anyway, 5 Pro Bowls, no All-Pro. I get that. That sucks. But 5 Pro Bowls, never led the league in rushing. You can make an argument that he is at least not first ballot. But he ran for over 1,000 yards a bunch of times. He made 5 Pro Bowls. Career high in rushing yards was 1,695. Yeah, tallied that in 2006. Then 2011 through 2013 made the Pro Bowl. 2011, 1,211 yards with 8 touchdowns. 2012, 1,214 yards with 8 touchdowns. 2013, 1,128 yards and 9 touchdowns. And remember, we're talking about a guy who was a backup running back in the last 3 years of his career. He was great with the 49ers and the Colts. And then he bounced around in the AFC East from the Dolphins to the Bills to the Jets. He was a backup running back ages 35 through 38. And he was still averaging roughly around the time 630 rushing yards a season. If you combine the 3 years combined, he was averaging around 620 during that time span. I don't know if that made sense or not, but you average it up, he was still producing about 600 a season. There we go. That's better. Better worded anyway. He's a Hall of Famer. If I hear one more individual say Frank Gore is not a Hall of Famer because he played in the league for 16 seasons, dope slap. You do realize that he is a Hall of Famer because he played in the league for 16 seasons. He's a Hall of Famer. 81 touchdowns in the regular season, an extra 600 yards and 5 touchdowns in the playoffs. You can argue me, but I do think Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer. And yes, I think he'll be first ballot also. All right, before I do end the video, I do want to do a part 2 for running backs. There's a lot of running backs that I wanted to talk about today that I simply just didn't have time to talk about. Brian Mitchell, one of the all-time return men in NFL history. I want to give my opinion on him. I want to give my opinion on a couple other of running backs from the early 2000s. Obviously, you didn't see Ricky Williams, but he's obviously one to talk about. Trying to see if there's anyone else off the top of my head that I really wanted to dive into. I'm sure I could find a couple other of fullbacks like Lorenzo Neal. Yeah, probably find a couple of more underrated running backs. Oh, Don Perkins, he actually passed away last week. But Don Perkins, 6-time Pro Bowler with the Cowboys. You know, he's another player I may want to go in depth one day. So I truly think whether that's later this week, sometime next week, I don't know. I got a pretty busy schedule ahead of me. But I do plan on doing one more edition of Hall of Fame or Hall of Good regarding running backs. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button. I'm Graf Left from Fletcher Sports. I'm saying enjoy the rest of your evening. Just in case you wanted to fast forward and skip the whole 40-minute explanation. One last time to recap. Waters in the Hall of Fame. Dillon, Hall of Fame. MJD, I love him, but just missed out. Shaun Alexander, Hall of Fame. Roger Craig, Hall of Fame. Priest Holmes, Hall of Fame. Mike Alstad, Hall of Fame. Chuck Foreman is a no. Clinton Portis is basically Clinton Portis is a yes. Same thing with Tiki Barber, and same thing with Chris Johnson. Have them wait still, but yes, they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame in due time. Jamal Lewis, I said no, but I mean, you honestly, I'm kind of being harsh. Yeah, you mean, you can make an argument Lewis is a Hall of Famer still. I'm torn. I don't know. The one Pro Bowl sends me one direction, 10,000 rushing yards. One being a 2,000-yard season sends me a different direction. Lewis is a flip of a coin. I say, yeah, but wait longer than other individuals. Fred Taylor, yes, and Frank Gore, yes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm Grant Fluff from Fletcher Sports Zone saying enjoy the rest of your evening. And this was edition 2 of Hall of Famer Hall of Good. And I gotta say, I'm loving this series. I know a bunch of you guys are as well, and you were looking forward to part 2. So, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.